The old Armenian mystic sat across from his eager student, his dark eyes glinting with an almost predatory intelligence. But before we dive into one of the most disturbing truths about human nature that Gurdjieff ever revealed, I need you to do something that might save your sanity. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will shatter everything you believe about yourself, and you'll want to come back to this channel when reality starts crumbling around you. Trust me, you're going to need guidance for what comes next. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff had spent decades studying in remote monasteries, ancient schools, and hidden corners of the world where real knowledge was preserved. Now, in his modest study, filled with strange instruments and esoteric texts, he was about to deliver one of his most devastating teachings, a truth so shocking that most people who hear it spend the rest of their lives trying to forget it. "You believe you are awake," Gurdjieff began, his thick mustache twitching slightly with what might have been amusement or pity. "You believe you think, you choose, you feel. This is the greatest illusion humanity has ever created about itself." And right here, I need to pause and ask you something crucial. Are you really ready for this? Because what Gurdjieff is about to reveal will destroy your comfortable assumptions about free will, consciousness, and human dignity. If you're not prepared to question everything you think you know about yourself, click away now. But if you have the courage to face the terrifying truth about what you really are, keep watching and make sure you're subscribed, because this is just the beginning of a journey that will change how you see every human being you ever encounter. The student, a well-educated professor from Harvard, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had come seeking wisdom about consciousness and spiritual development, not to have his fundamental assumptions about human nature challenged so directly. Little did he know that he was about to discover something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Gurdjieff reached into his vest pocket and withdrew an ornate mechanical watch, its golden surface catching the lamplight. With practiced precision, he opened the case, revealing the intricate clockwork mechanisms within. Dozens of tiny gears, springs, and wheels moved in perfect synchronization, each component responding automatically to the forces acting upon it. Here's where it gets disturbing, and I'm warning you now, if you're not subscribed to this channel, you need to be, because this revelation is going to leave you with questions that will keep you awake at night. "Look at this watch," Gurdjieff commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed truths that most people spent their entire lives avoiding. Every gear, every spring, every wheel moves according to mechanical laws. When I wind the spring, energy is stored. When I release it, that energy flows through the system in predetermined ways. Each component has no choice in its movement. It simply responds to the forces acting upon it. The professor nodded, unsure where this demonstration was leading, but sensing that something profound was being unveiled. And if you're feeling that same sense of unease right now, good. That means you're beginning to understand what's coming.
"Now," Gurdjieff continued, snapping the watch closed with a sharp click, "explain to me how human beings are any different." Stop. Pause this video right now and think about that question. Really think about it. Can you explain how you're different from that mechanical watch? Keep watching, because your answer is about to be destroyed. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. The professor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, his mind struggling to process the implications of what Gurdjieff was suggesting. You wake up each morning because your biological clock, your mechanical impulses force you to wake. You feel hungry because chemical reactions in your body trigger the sensation of hunger. You become angry because external circumstances press certain emotional buttons that were installed in you through conditioning. You fall in love because hormones and psychological patterns create the illusion of choice in mate selection. Are you starting to feel uncomfortable yet? Good. That discomfort is your mind recognizing a truth it doesn't want to accept. And this is exactly why you need to subscribe to this channel, because facing these uncomfortable truths is the only way to break free from the prison most people never even realize they're in. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every action you take, all mechanical responses to forces acting upon your biological and psychological machinery. Gurdjieff stood and began pacing the small room, his presence somehow filling the space despite his modest stature. Human beings are extraordinarily complex machines, far more sophisticated than this watch, but machines nonetheless. They have more moving parts, more intricate programming, more elaborate responses to stimuli, but the fundamental principle is identical. Input, processing, output, stimulus, response, cause, effect. The professor felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. Everything he had believed about free will, about human dignity, about consciousness itself was being systematically dismantled by this strange man with the hypnotic eyes. And if you're feeling that same cold sensation right now, you're beginning to wake up to something terrifying. But here's what I need you to understand, and this is why subscribing to this channel is so important. Most people who hear this truth will immediately reject it, go back to sleep, and pretend they never heard it. Don't be one of those people. But surely, the professor protested, humans have the capacity for genuine choice, for creativity, for spiritual growth. We can transcend our programming. Gurdjieff's laugh was neither cruel nor kind. It simply contained the weight of absolute certainty. Can you? At this moment, can you choose to stop your heart from beating? Can you decide that gravity will no longer affect you? Can you think a thought that is not the inevitable result of your previous thoughts, your conditioning, your biological state, and the external stimuli you are currently receiving? The professor struggled to formulate a response, but found himself trapped in a logical maze. Every argument he could conceive seemed to prove Gurdjieff's point rather than refute it. This is the moment where most people's minds start scrambling for escape routes. They start making excuses, finding exceptions, anything to avoid facing what's staring them in the face. If you're doing that right now, I understand, but I'm begging you to stay with this and make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next will show you there's actually hope in this seemingly hopeless revelation. Now, Gurdjieff continued, settling back into his chair. The machine that calls itself human has one particularly sophisticated feature. It has been programmed to believe it is not a machine. This creates the illusion of free will, of consciousness, of choice. The machine experiences its mechanical responses as decisions. It feels its programmed reactions as authentic emotions. It mistakes its conditioned thought patterns for independent thinking. Let that sink in for a moment. You've been programmed to believe you're not programmed. You've been conditioned to think your conditioning doesn't exist. The matrix has convinced you there is no matrix. Gurdjieff picked up a small mechanical toy from his desk, a wind-up bird that, when activated, would hop around and chirp. He turned the key several times, building tension in the spring, then placed it on the desk and released it. The bird immediately began its programmed dance, hopping and chirping with apparent enthusiasm. "Watch this bird," he instructed. If it possessed the same kind of consciousness that humans believe they have, it would think to itself, "I am choosing to hop now. I feel like chirping. I have decided to move in this direction." The bird would experience its mechanical movements as conscious choices, never suspecting that every action is simply the inevitable result of the wound spring releasing its stored energy through predetermined mechanical pathways. This analogy is about to get even more disturbing, and I guarantee it will change how you see every person around you. Make sure you're subscribed, because once you see what Gurdjieff is pointing to, there's no going back. As if to emphasize the point, the bird gradually slowed its movements as the spring unwound, finally coming to a complete stop in a posture that looked almost contemplative. The human machine is infinitely more complex, but the principle is identical. You wind up human beings with food, sleep, social interaction, intellectual stimulation, emotional triggers, and they dance their programmed dance, all while believing they are making conscious choices. The professor felt something fundamental shifting in his worldview, like tectonic plates grinding against each other deep beneath the surface of his consciousness. "If what you're saying is true," he whispered, "then everything, love, art, religion, philosophy, science, it's all just mechanical responses of biological machines?" Here's where it gets really terrifying. Everything you think makes humans special, everything you believe gives life meaning, what if it's all just sophisticated biological programming? Stay with me here and make sure you're subscribed, because Gurdjieff is about to reveal the one thing that can save you from this mechanical nightmare.
"But you," the professor said suddenly, grasping for something solid in this new reality. "You seem different. You appear to have genuine choice, real consciousness. How do you explain that?" Gurdjieff's eyes seemed to grow even darker, more penetrating. "Ah, now you ask the essential question. You are correct. There is a difference, but it is not the difference between machine and non-machine. It is the difference between a machine that knows it is a machine and a machine that believes it is something else entirely. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. Pay attention, because what Gurdjieff says next will either save you or drive you deeper into mechanical sleep." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an almost hypnotic whisper. "The path to real consciousness, to genuine choice, to authentic being, begins with the brutal recognition of what you actually are. As long as you believe you are already conscious, already making real choices, already truly alive, you will remain trapped in the mechanical dream of imaginary awakeness. The hope you're looking for is coming, but first you have to face the full horror of your condition. Make sure you're subscribed, because learning to navigate this territory requires guidance, and most people who attempt this journey alone get lost in despair." Gurdjieff reached across the desk and picked up the now motionless mechanical bird. This bird cannot choose to be anything other than what it is, but a human being who truly understands their mechanical nature, who sees through the illusion of automatic consciousness, such a person begins to possess something that might eventually become genuine choice. "How?" the professor asked, his voice barely audible. "Here it comes, the secret that can transform a biological machine into something approaching a conscious being. This is why this channel exists, why you need to be subscribed, why this knowledge is so dangerous that it's been hidden for centuries." Gurdjieff replied, "Through the development of what I call self-remembering. Most humans spend their entire lives in a state of identification, completely absorbed in whatever is happening to them, completely at the mercy of their mechanical reactions. They see a beautiful sunset and become the sensation of beauty. They encounter an insult and become the emotion of anger. They think a thought and become that thought. There is no separation, no objective awareness, no real observer. Think about your own life right now. When was the last time you were truly observing yourself rather than being completely absorbed in your thoughts, emotions, or activities? If you can't remember, you're beginning to understand why this work is so crucial and why you need to stay connected to this channel." Gurdjieff stood again and walked to the window, gazing out at the busy street below. He said, "Look at those people,
gesturing toward the pedestrians hurrying past. Every one of them believes they are awake, conscious, making deliberate choices about their lives. In reality, they are sleepwalking through existence, responding automatically to every stimulus, driven by forces they neither understand nor control. The professor joined him at the window and watched the crowds below with new eyes. He began to see the mechanical nature of their movements, the way they responded predictably to traffic lights, the way their faces reflected automatic emotional reactions to their internal thoughts, the way they seemed to move through their routines like complex automatons following invisible programming. Right now, as you're watching this video, look around you. Look at the people in your life. Can you see what Gurdjieff is pointing to? Can you see the mechanical patterns, the automatic responses, the unconscious programming running their lives? And more importantly, can you see it in yourself? Self-remembering, Gurdjieff continued, is the practice of maintaining a divided attention, part of your awareness engaged with whatever you are doing or experiencing, and part of your awareness observing the one who is doing or experiencing. Instead of becoming your anger, you observe yourself being angry. Instead of losing yourself in a beautiful sunset, you remain aware of yourself as the one observing beauty. It sounds simple, the professor said. Simple to understand, nearly impossible to do, Gurdjieff replied with a slight smile. The machine is programmed to forget itself constantly, to become identified with every passing thought, emotion, and sensation. To maintain self-remembering for even a few consecutive minutes requires enormous effort and sustained practice. And this is exactly why you need to subscribe to this channel. What Gurdjieff is describing isn't just philosophical theory, it's practical work that requires ongoing guidance and support. Most people who try this alone give up within days. Gurdjieff reached across the desk and opened a thick, leather-bound journal filled with his handwritten notes. I have spent decades studying this phenomenon in myself and others. The average person can maintain genuine self-remembering for perhaps 30 seconds before being pulled back into mechanical identification. Even those who practice for years rarely sustain it for more than a few minutes at a time. 30 seconds. Think about that. The average person can only observe themselves objectively for 30 seconds before being sucked back into the mechanical dream. How long can you maintain self-awareness right now? Try it. Try to observe yourself watching this video while simultaneously being aware that you are the one doing the observing. But what's the point? The professor asked, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of what was being suggested. If we're just machines, if everything we do is mechanical, why struggle to become conscious of it? This is the question that determines everything. Why bother waking up if you're just going to discover you're a machine? Gurdjieff's answer will either inspire you to begin the most important work of your life or send you back to comfortable sleep. Gurdjieff's eyes flashed with something that might have been fierce joy, because consciousness, real consciousness, is the only thing in the universe that can transcend its own mechanical nature. A machine that becomes fully aware of its own mechanisms begins to develop the possibility of genuine choice. Not the illusion of choice that comes from mechanical reactions, but real choice that emerges from objective understanding. He walked over to an old piano in the corner of the room and struck a single key. The note rang out clear and pure, gradually fading into silence. That note had no choice about the frequency at which it vibrated. That was determined by the physical properties of the string and the force with which the key was struck. But a conscious being can choose which note to play, when to play it, how to combine it with other notes to create music that transcends the mechanical properties of the individual sounds. This is the hope hidden within the horror. Yes, you're a machine, but you're a machine with the unprecedented possibility of becoming conscious of your own mechanical nature. And that consciousness, that awareness, is the beginning of something that transcends mechanism entirely. You're saying, the professor said slowly, that by understanding our mechanical nature, we can eventually transcend it? Not transcend. That implies leaving it behind, which is impossible. We remain biological machines until we die. But we can develop something new within the machine, a conscious awareness that can observe the mechanical processes without being enslaved by them. This awareness can learn to make choices based on understanding rather than automatic reaction.
The work isn't about becoming non-mechanical. It's about developing consciousness within the machine. And this is why staying connected to this channel is so important, because this work requires ongoing guidance and community support. Gurdjieff opened his watch again and pointed to the complex mechanism inside. See how these gears interact? Each one constrains the movement of the others, but their interaction also enables the whole system to function. Human consciousness works similarly. Our mechanical processes, thoughts, emotions, bodily functions, continue to operate according to their programming. But conscious awareness can learn to work with these processes rather than being unconsciously driven by them. The professor felt a strange mixture of despair and hope. The despair came from recognizing how thoroughly mechanical his own life had been, how rarely he had experienced anything resembling genuine choice or authentic consciousness. The hope came from the possibility that something different might be achievable. If you're feeling that same mixture right now, you're in exactly the right place. Subscribe to this channel because what comes next is going to require everything you've got. This is why traditional approaches to spiritual development so often fail, Gurdjieff continued. They try to make the machine more spiritual, more moral, more elevated, but they never question the fundamental assumption that the person is already conscious. It's like trying to teach a wind-up toy to be more enlightened. The toy will go through the motions of enlightenment, but it's still just a toy following its programming. Think about every self-help book you've read, every spiritual practice you've tried, every attempt you've made to improve yourself. Were you trying to make the machine better, or were you questioning whether you were conscious in the first place? This distinction changes everything. So what does real development look like? The professor asked. First, you must truly see and accept your own mechanicalness, not as a philosophical concept, but as a lived reality that you observe in yourself moment by moment. Watch how your thoughts arise automatically in response to stimuli. Notice how your emotions are triggered by circumstances beyond your control. Observe how your behaviors follow predictable patterns based on your conditioning. This is the practical work, and it's harder than anything you've ever attempted. You'll need ongoing support, guidance, and encouragement. Make sure you're subscribed, because this channel will be your lifeline when the work gets difficult. Gurdjieff pulled out another mechanical device, this one resembling a small calculator with rotating dials and gears. The human machine processes information through three primary centers: intellectual, emotional, and physical. Each center has its own programming, its own mechanical responses. Most people never learn to distinguish between these centers, so they remain unconscious of how their internal machinery operates. He adjusted the dials on the device to demonstrate. When you encounter a problem, notice which center responds first. Does your mind immediately start analyzing? Do you have an emotional reaction? Does your body tense up? Observe these reactions without trying to change them. Simply see how the machine operates. And then, the professor prompted,
Then you begin the long work of developing what I call the observer, a conscious awareness that can watch the machine without being absorbed into its operations. This observer gradually learns to recognize the difference between mechanical reactions and conscious responses. Eventually, it may develop the capacity for genuine choice. The observer, this is what you're working to develop. Not a better machine, not a more spiritual machine, but an awareness that can observe the machine objectively. This is the most important work you'll ever do, and you'll need guidance every step of the way. Gurdjieff closed the mechanical device and set it aside. But understand this clearly. What I am describing is not another spiritual technique or self-improvement method. It is the recognition of an objective fact about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Humans are sophisticated biological machines that have the potential to develop consciousness, but very few ever actualize this potential. The professor sat quietly for several minutes, trying to absorb the implications of everything he had heard. Finally, he asked, "How many people do you think ever achieve real consciousness?" Perhaps 1 in a million develop even a rudimentary level of genuine awareness. And of those, perhaps 1 in 1,000 develops anything approaching consistent consciousness. The level of effort required is so enormous, and the illusion of already being conscious is so convincing that most people never even attempt the work. 1 in a million. Those are the odds you're facing. But here's what Gurdjieff understood and what you need to understand if you're going to be one of those rare individuals. You can't do this work alone. You need guidance, support, and community. That's why this channel exists. "That's terrifying," the professor whispered. "Truth often is," Gurdjieff agreed. "But it is only through facing the terror of our actual condition that we create the possibility of something different. As long as you believe you are already awake, you will continue sleeping. As long as you believe you already have real choice, you will remain enslaved to mechanical reactions. As long as you believe you are already conscious, you will continue to be a very sophisticated machine that dreams it is something more. The terror is the beginning of wisdom. If what you've heard today has terrified you, good. That means you're beginning to wake up. And if you're going to stay awake, you're going to need all the help you can get." Gurdjieff stood and walked to a shelf lined with strange instruments and ancient texts. "The knowledge I am sharing with you has been preserved in various forms throughout history, but it has always been hidden from the masses. Do you know why?" The professor shook his head. "Because this knowledge is dangerous. A person who truly understands their mechanical nature and begins to develop genuine consciousness cannot be easily controlled, manipulated, or predicted. They become capable of responses that transcend their programming. From the perspective of society, which depends on predictable mechanical behavior from its members, such individuals are potentially disruptive. This is why the work is so important and why it's so difficult. Society needs you to remain asleep, predictable, controllable. Waking up is an act of rebellion against the entire mechanical system of human civilization." "Are you saying this knowledge should be kept secret?" the professor asked. "I am saying this knowledge protects itself. Most people who encounter it will reject it immediately because it threatens their fundamental assumptions about themselves. Of those who don't reject it outright, most will try to turn it into another belief system or spiritual practice, thereby missing the point entirely. Only a very few will be capable of applying it seriously to their own direct experience. Which category do you fall into? Are you going to reject this, turn it into another belief system, or actually begin the work? Your answer will determine the entire trajectory of your life from this moment forward." Gurdjieff returned to his chair and fixed the professor with his penetrating gaze. "Which category do you belong to? Will you dismiss what I have told you as the ravings of a madman? Will you try to fit it into your existing worldview as an interesting philosophical concept? Or will you begin the difficult work of observing your own mechanical nature directly? The professor felt as though he stood at the edge of an abyss. Everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything he had used to define himself lay behind him. Ahead stretched an unknown territory where his most basic assumptions about human nature, consciousness, and free will no longer applied. This is where you are right now, at the edge of the abyss. Behind you lies comfortable sleep, familiar illusions, the mechanical dream of imaginary consciousness. Ahead lies the terrifying but liberating work of developing genuine awareness. If you're ready to begin this work, subscribe to this channel. You're going to need all the help you can get. And remember, the machine that believes it is already conscious will continue to sleep. Only the machine that recognizes its mechanical nature has the possibility of awakening. The Gurdjieff Rachik Machik on time with perfect intention went away with its sweep. But you have the possibility of becoming something more than a mechanical watch. You have the potential to develop consciousness within the machine, to become an observer of your own mechanical processes, to develop something approaching genuine choice. The question is, will you take the first step? Will you try to remember yourself for 1 minute right now as you finish watching this video? Can you observe yourself watching, thinking, reacting, while remaining aware that you are the one doing the observing? If you're ready to begin this work, subscribe to this channel. You're going to need all the help you can get. And remember, the machine that believes it is already conscious will continue to sleep. Only the machine that recognizes its mechanical nature has the possibility of awakening. The choice, if it can be called a choice, is yours.